Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. I'm your host, Erik Roth, and this is an astrological update. This is episode number 12, and we're going to be looking at the rest of this month in November and kind of a sneak preview, a little bit of going into December. There'll be another episode the first, probably somewhere around the first week of December. And we'll be talking about a lot of things that are going on that month, including the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. And then also I will be doing in the future a special episode of the 2021, looking into the future. And that will be towards the end of December. But meanwhile, we have an episode to dive into here and looking at the alignments of mid to late November here and in number 12. And so what we like to do right now is just simply take a breath at this time of great change that's continuing to roll on here in the year 2020 and honor and acknowledge the creation itself, our breath, all the elements of fire, air, and Mother Earth and water. Connect to our ancestors and honor those that came before us and are here today and those that will come after us. All the planets, the stars, the sun and the moon, everything that is made possible here to be on this planet. And to accept the guidance and wisdom and the love of who we are on this day and going forward here. We are part of the cosmic creation, honoring all relations and all our relations that are all around us today, tomorrow, and yesterday. They are all playing a role in helping us become who we are intended to become. And part of the great epic drama that is humanity. Stepping into that space for ourselves, feeling as part of that creation, and knowing that we all have a role to play, small or large, it doesn't matter. It's important to us, and that we take those steps in honoring our own truth and taking responsibility for that, and our own responsibility for our own actions, our own words, and going beyond that. Being us, being true to ourselves. Thank you. All right, so let's take a look at the highlights for this particular episode, number 12. This is reviewing that recently Mars went back into action, direct action. That means it stationed direct just on November 13th. We'll be entering the season of Sagittarius in less than a week from the recording of this episode. And also Venus moving into the sign of Scorpio, along with Saturn, Pluto, and the Jupiter orb. This is going to be really important for us to dive into. In fact, the change that Venus going into Scorpio means it's leaving the sign of Libra. You know, describing what that means is also going to be a kind of a shift in as far as the feminine approach and its experience moving forward into this over this next almost month. Venus will be in that sign of Scorpio. But the theme continues with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter. And I wrote orb. So in this case, when I say orb, it's meaning that they are in a certain collection together. They are part of an orb together in the sky. And they're at their closest point at the time of this recording, but they will be starting to separate by next week and the weeks following, which will start to release some of this energy that's concentrated. So that could create some additional developments in the United States and in other places, around the world. All right, so deeper into the crossroads, some of these dates here. Mars stationed direct at 15 degrees Aries on November 13th. On the 14th, we did have a new moon at 23 degrees, 17 minutes Scorpio. And that celebrates the time of Scorpio, celebrates the connection to life force energy, the primal passions and desires, and going deep and starting fresh, starting anew with those passions and desires. And that we're taking it where it's leading, taking us to the edge and perhaps beyond, to showing us a potential future for ourselves of planting the seeds for something where it really engages ourselves in a deeper way. Then we have, as I mentioned in the last video, November 15th or 19th, Venus in Libra squaring that Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn area in Capricorn. That's between 23 and 28 degrees Capricorn and Libra. And Venus is in there until the 19th in that zone. And then Mercury has an opposition with Uranus in the Scorpio Taurus area. Uranus is in Taurus. This is the third time in 6 weeks that this has happened. Since Mercury went retrograde in Scorpio, backed into Libra, and then moved back into Scorpio. The sun is entering Sagittarius at the head and claws of the Scorpion constellation at the same time that Venus enters Scorpio. So we can see that Venus is beginning to catch up in the sky, if you will, with the sun in the morning sky. And then on the 21st, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto are now beyond a 4.5 degree orb in Capricorn. And then on the 29th, they move beyond a 5 degree orb in Capricorn. And on the 30th, we have a lunar eclipse. It's a penumbral or a pulse lunar eclipse that takes place at 8:38 Gemini. All right, so let's just begin in setting the tone here for the season of Sagittarius, since this is coming up. I normally don't talk about sun signs too often, but it's always important to acknowledge when they move into their time of the season, and just to kind of see this as another example of how we can look at this. So think of it as like the field in which the rest of the planets are operating. It's kind of that background environment, that the seasonal energy that humanity is experiencing. This is from November 21st through December 21st. And this is an exploration of truth and meaning, acceptance of truth, vision questing, and exploration for meaning. So it's an exploring for that chance to find meaning and truth. And the acceptance of truth, this is a really big one. In fact, in the last several years, especially between that really started in that 2015 to 2017 period when Saturn was in the sign of Sagittarius and then moving into Capricorn, it's that responsibility to the truth. It's not about making things up and trying to cover up one's you might say faults or errors or mistakes, or not taking responsibility for oneself, but it's accepting of the truth that we have within us, the truth of the reality that's around us, the truth of our own spiritual questing, and not necessarily some made up truth. And that's certainly been very strongly in the arena in this time of year here. At this election period, we can see a lot of self sort of created things that are out there to disrupt and create chaos. And they do it for a certain, it's kind of think of the shadow of Gemini, the shadow of Sagittarius, even Scorpio for that matter, where it's just creating a certain chaos for chaos's sake and not accepting responsibility for what is actually taking place. For example, the election that went off, from what I understand, really smoothly, and that we can see the truth of it. There were cameras in these voting polls, and counting areas. And, people were allowed to go in and watch and take part of this. So, and of course, certain people won't take responsibility for their own actions and perhaps losing the election, and then project that out because they're not able to accept who they are in what they've faced and the reality that they've just faced. So this is about really accepting that truth within, and this is a hope, of course, during the season that perhaps a certain truth can be accepted during this time without the use of violence or anything along those lines. Speaking one's voice is also really important during this time, whatever that is that one believes. Feel free, please. This is certainly about that. And also one's spiritual truth. So taking look at going within and journeying, doing a vision questing, doing a meditation and journeying within to find one's own truth and meaning and what it feels, how it enters the mind, how it enters the soul, to each their own, and how they're going to go into that journey for themselves. But this is really important, is to really get that within oneself. And what are we also conditioned, are we watching certain things that are influencing us and fixed in a certain truth and are unable to bend from that, or perhaps we're too wide open and unable to even know where the truth lies. That can be also a shadow of Sagittarius. But somewhere in between is where the sort of the sweet spot in that space, by being open, but still understanding the evolvement of one's truth, that it isn't a fixed thing, that it continues to unfold as we go along. Again, this is from November 21st through December 21st. Just a review, when Mars stationed direct, this was on the 13th of November. So this was 4 days ago, the day before the new moon. We can see that it happened right between Neptune and Uranus, and that now Mars is making its way toward Uranus. It won't reach there until mid to late January, more like late January, as it goes into that sign. It enters that sign on beginning on January 6th, 7th, depending on where you are on the globe. But this is, I think, beginning really helping us, because there was sort of like this, a stationary point, and Mars's energy was kind of, in some cases, it could have been felt like it was stuck, unable to perceive like what is really going on, and like there's a certain stagnancy with that. But now it's moving into direct. It's moved into direct. There's a certain action around the masculine, taking responsibility and its connection to mission and purpose, and going forward. And there will be some additional alignments between Mars, Saturn, Jupiter, Pluto, as well as Eris. And so we're going to look at that in one of the slides that are coming up here. And just a reminder that, December is a really, really active month as well. And so that before we really get into that stage where the next phase, 2021, becomes a very different stage, a very different experience, I believe, compared to 2020, because of Saturn and Jupiter moving into Aquarius and over the next month. All right, so whenever a planet stations, stationing means it looks like it's at a standstill. It's either going to station backwards or forwards, retrograde or direct. And in the case of Mars, it started the month only at 16 degrees, 18 minutes retrograde. There's 30 degrees in each house or sign in the sky. And Mars then went backwards only 1 degree in those 2 weeks to 15 degrees and 13 minutes. And then after it went direct, it moved only 2 more degrees. So the grand total of the movement as far as like from the beginning of the month to the end of the month, is less than 1 degree. So it was really, it didn't really, when one is looking at the sky and looking at where Mars is, it basically barely moved. It barely moved in the sky. So this is that point where that Mars is transitioning, that Earth is starting to really pass it up and accelerate, if you will. I wouldn't say accelerate, but it looks like it feels like it's accelerating, that the planet is peeling away from us. So that means that Mars is peeling away from us, but it's really just the motion of Earth is noticeably, you can see how much faster Earth is moving than, or experience how much faster Earth is moving than Mars, just by watching Mars now starting to move more in the sky. That means that Earth is really continuing on its orbit, and you can see that in that experience that Mars is not moving as fast as the Earth. And that is just something to, from an observer standpoint, that's what's going on. We're the third planet from the sun, and Mars is the fourth planet. For Venus and Mercury, that would be a different experience. It would be those two planets catching up with Earth and passing us up, and then leaving Earth behind, if you will, in the solar system. Okay, so Mars has these hard aspects. Since July, there has been a lot of what we call hard aspects or dynamic aspects in shamanic astrology. And there's 4 more coming up in December and January. We have Eris and Pluto. First is a Mars conjunction with Eris on December 22nd, and then a Pluto square Mars on December 23rd, and then a Saturn square Mars on January 13th, and a Jupiter square Mars on January 22nd. And also in December, one of the reasons why it's another thing to look at is that Eris and Pluto are also in a square to each other, the exact square. They're in the window right now. They're within 1 degree. And it takes a long time for those two planetary bodies to separate from each other in different configurations. And so what I mean by a square, so for those of you who want to visualize what that is, you think of a first quarter moon or a last quarter moon. That's essentially a square. That means that the sun would be on one horizon, or the eastern or western horizon, and the moon would be roughly in between the two horizons. So that would be looked at as a square. So in this case, it would be Mars in between the two horizons or on the horizon, and Pluto or Pluto or Saturn or Jupiter on the horizons or up at the top of the sky. So this is just a visual explanation as to how that and why those are important. We're looking at first and last quarter moons, looking at full moons and new moons. Those are the big phases of the moon, the big 4. And so that's why they're also just as important with the planets and how they configure or an aspect to each other, and the sun and the moon and so forth. So those are all vital aspects to consider. It means the hard aspects, squares in particular, mean a crossroads, a change. Something needs to move, something needs to give, that there's a pressure and a stress being placed upon a particular point, energetically speaking, and that something's got to give. And so then there's a release. Once the square ends, there's a release of that energy. And so that's something to consider and visualize in that space. All right, at the end of this month of November, we have a full moon lunar eclipse. This isn't a so-called blood moon or a red moon. This is a penumbral moon, or a pulse. It's basically when the moon is in the outer edge of the shadow of Earth. So the sun is on one side of the Earth and the moon is on the other side. And so it's not quite perfectly aligned, and then the moon just kind of passes the outer edge of the Earth's shadow. And so some astronomers call this an pulse eclipse, but it's the penumbra. The umbra would be within the main focal point, the shadow of the Earth. And that's where we get the word umbrella, covering, a shadow effect upon us, and also a protection, in the case of an umbrella from the sun or from rain. This lunar eclipse would be visible. So stay up in the middle of the night in the early morning skies in North and South America, and in the evening skies in Eastern Asia and Australia. Only the outer edge of northern Europe will, according to the map, you'll be able to see it. I think the Scandinavian area, if you happen to live in that area. Okay, so what else is important about this lunar eclipse is that it takes place at 8 degrees 38 minutes Gemini, with the sun, of course, in Sagittarius, just exactly the opposite place. So this is a really interesting area. If you were to look in the sky, most likely you would be able to see this star, Aldebaran. This is one of the 4 stars that were considered royal. They're also at one time marked, that star at one time marked one of the cardinal points in the sky, and it will again in several more centuries. The other stars that fit that description are Fomalhaut, Antares, and Regulus. All 4 of those stars mark that area, and they were just about any culture you looked at. And if you do the research here, and I'm planning to co-create and collaborate a particular webinar about these royal stars and how and about their importance and their meaning. This will be with Caitlin Costello, a colleague of mine, and also the co-founder of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. So she's done also research into the stars, and there's just a lot of wonderful information out there if one decides to look into that. Some really beautiful. And so whenever a moon or a planet connects with that part of the sky, one of those royal stars, it takes on an extra significance. And Aldebaran sits at the eye of the bull constellation. Not astronomers call it Taurus, but it's the actual bull, not the sign of Taurus. So it's that eye of the bull. It's marking vision, a certain category of connection, of being on target, but also a certain idea of connection to this, as far as Gemini goes, of imagination, of communication, and maybe looking into ourselves within when it comes to the shadow. And are we missing something? Is there something we're holding back, something we haven't fully acknowledged or connected with when we're communicating with others? This could be a time to really connect with that. And on the other side, of course, the sun in Sagittarius, being on the trail of meaning of truth. And a lot of the issues that I talked about, or qualities that I talked about, bullet points in the sun, the solar cycle, going through the sign of Sagittarius. So these eclipses are really important when we get into eclipse seasons. The next eclipse after that is December 14th, and I'll talk about that in my next video. That's a new moon total solar eclipse that takes place in South America. So I'll be discussing that. But this is something that each of us can connect with, even if we don't stay up late at night. Maybe we can meditate on that day. And from a shamanic perspective, these moon phases, the major ones, are over a 3-day span. So a full moon, you can look in the sky and see it from a visual perspective. It looks full for 3 days. It's not exactly full for 3 days. It's only exactly full for just a few moments, but the rest of the time it's in the 90+ percentile range of being full. So that's when it looks really, really full and bright. It'll be really high in the sky. It's next to the part of the sky where this part of the sky tends to show up where the sun is in this the late spring and almost at the point of summer solstice here in the northern hemisphere, and then winter in the southern hemisphere. So this is getting close to that point. You'll last night even I was out and saw Orion. I saw Betelgeuse and Rigel and Bellatrix and Orion's belt, and Orion's hand comes up, also known as the hunter, and the hunter's hand is coming up and sort of holding that galactic edge in its hand. That's the point, the opposite of galactic center. So all of these things are part of this magical period where the moon is crossing by Aldebaran, the eye of the bull, and into near the galactic edge or galactic extreme, as sometimes I like to call it, because it's like out in the extreme edge of the Milky Way galaxy. Also, the Pleiades is nearby, only about 8 degrees away from the eclipse. And so something to take note, there's a huge amount of stories and mythology centered around the Pleiades, and it's one of the, along with many other stars, this cluster is the one of the Bahamian stars and magical, as a certain magical properties that alchemists used since time immemorial. All right, well, let's move on to other parts of this episode. Okay, so this is something I talked about in the last episode, but I want to come back into it since we're right now experiencing the middle of this. And we know that the US general election happened on November 3rd. And we have this period where this concentration of Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto coming within about 4 degrees of each other, or roughly a 4-degree orb, within 5 degrees, 4.5 degrees. I use 4 because I'm rounding down to its closest point, because for a few days it gets within 4.5. So, but this would be, if we were to see Pluto, we would see Jupiter and Pluto very close to each other like this. I believe this is on the 12th, when Jupiter and Pluto were actually in conjunction with each other. And then Saturn only about 4.5 degrees away from that. So we can see that configuration right here between the Archer constellation and the Goatfish. But as this is going on, it's squaring Eris and squaring Venus. And Mars has a loose opposition to Venus and very loose conjunction with Eris, and a loose square. But then Mars comes back, as I mentioned, in December. It starts to roll back into the area where it squares these 3 planets. So again, this is a fertile ground, a fertile cauldron of co-creation happening right now. And, moving into the season of Sagittarius and taking responsibility for our truth, what is really important, how we can plant the seeds for the long-term future, be rebirth and take care of the earth itself, and our responsibility and our relationship to that, our relationship to each other, and creating systems and helping each other out. This is why, in part, with Venus and Libra, adding that energy in. But in order for, and in Saturn's case, in order for civilization to really be able to rebirth itself, it requires a shakeout, but also collaboration and cooperation, because there wouldn't be systems and structures without that. It would be, we'd be all in small groups going our own way. But this is the forging of unity, of connection with each other. And it's all about connecting with our visions and trying to find some semblance of organization and points of reference where we have things in common that we want. For example, we all want joy and love and happiness to a large extent. We all want to feel good. We all want our family to feel safe and to be educated, and to ourselves as well, fulfilling our authentic expression of who we are. And that requires a sense of going beyond divisiveness, going beyond the division or separation, but something that actually brings us together. And it's a kind of a bit of an irony that's happening with our culture here, especially in the United States, but other parts of the world as well, where there's a lot of divisiveness happening. And then, of course, with the COVID-19 situation, that's creating separation from a social perspective. And even with the holidays coming up, that we won't be able to gather, quote, in large groups, or at least from a health perspective. But this is temporary. And it's showing us the importance of family, showing us the importance of community and of coming together, and how much we can, missing something can show us the importance of that to a large extent, especially when it comes to the core elements of what makes us human. And I saw a lot of that in September when the fires came through my area here in Southern Oregon, and community banding together regardless of political ideology. They saw it was the most basic human element of helping each other out, brothers and sisters and others helping each other out and trying to make each other whole again. That's part of why humanity is here. And yes, I do have a certain optimistic view of humanity. I admit that, but it is really important to recognize for ourselves. So when you're out there connecting with Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter in the night sky, meditate on that. Connect with the ancient rhythm. Find out for yourself how meaningful that could be, and in your own life, in your own community, and how you can co-create and collaborate, and being able to contribute to community in a beneficial way, instead of a way that creates division and separation, and you might say even to some extent violence, and not accepting one's truth, not accepting taking responsibility for one's own path rather than taking it out on others. So I do believe in the long term that we will find that greater community, that we will find a way to come together. But we are still in this period where it's going to take some time to build that trust with each other after several years of challenges. And 2020 is just kind of a climatic time of that. And I will go more into this in the next few videos, especially the preview, probably be an hour episode about 2021. So just as a reminder, the signs of Aries, Libra, Capricorn, Cancer are all culture bearer signs, what traditional astrologers call cardinal signs, and some actually a lot still do. But culture bearer or householder has more meaning to that. And there's a certain definition. I mean, having more meaning means that it can define it much more clearer. So they're the things, these signs are the things that kind of holds the foundation of civilization together. And, for three outer planets that have very significant relationship with Earth, with the humanity and our psyche, our psychology, this is really a symbolic death rebirth for us. And, around Capricorn, around structure and systems, including economic, cultural, social, health, educational, governmental, political systems and structures. This is the crisis of crises that we've had as far as our age is concerned. And this won't be necessarily the only one we'll experience, but certainly won't be the same kind of thing that we've had. But it will show us how, showing us the shadow of all of these kinds of systems and structures, maybe how we can improve upon that or rebuild it in some fashion or start anew in some other ways, and come together and remind ourselves that we're all one family. Okay, so there was a Venus Spica conjunction just recently here, and I just wanted to remind people that this was also a connection to the strong connection to the feminine and to the the expression of our relationship with Mother Earth, with Gaia, and the need to put some additional attention on that, because that is, as far as the Earth and the environment is concerned, that's really this crisis that doesn't end. We've had, according to the National Weather Service and other climatologists and meteorologists around the country, the record, we've beat the record in the number of named storms in the Atlantic and Gulf Coast of the US. The fires along the West Coast. Never before have we experienced anything like this in the last century and a half. So we are really at this epicenter, this great crisis that's happening. And we're seeing, some early effects of sea level rise. This is all disconcerting. And this is all something that everybody should take notice of, regardless of one's ideology, that this affects us all, that no one is going to be immune to this. And so this could be a way for us to connect together, and that it is just as real as gravity is real. It's just as real as the sphere of the Earth is spinning and the moon is orbiting it and we're orbiting the sun. It's just as real as our breath. This is here, and in ancient times, there were a lot of cultures that were stewards to the land. So this is the priests, the priestesses, the druids, the shamans. They all cared for the land, and the land cared for them. There was a responsibility that they had in their relationship with that. Going back many tens, well, probably tens of thousands of years, depending on how far one goes back here. There was a certain recognition of those ancient forces that are still with us today. So Venus in Libra, just to give you this update here, as before it moves into Scorpio, this goes on until November 21st. This is about, building of relationships and community, and being diplomatic, being peaceful. It could be, I looked at this ahead of time as a stabilizing force and a balancing to the intensity of Mars and Eris in Aries, and the stellium, the stellium of planets in Capricorn. So we have seen that actually, and all of the things that have happened since the election, for the most part, have been peaceful, and people have been able to share their voices. People have been able to, be heard. And so to me, those are beneficial signs that we could do this, that we can navigate through this period and help ourselves and stay healthy and navigate, because we're seeing signs of being able to see the light at the end of this dark time that we're in. Eris, I don't have the slide for Venus and Scorpio in here for whatever reason. I just wanted to comment on Venus and Scorpio upcoming. I may share a little bit more in a future video then, just to kind of add in some additional insights. But since this is a Venus and Libra side, I will just share that Venus moves into Scorpio November 21st. This is the feminine that relates to Kali and Pele, these ancient underworld goddesses. In Pele's case, it's a volcanic goddess, but she's very synonymous with the underworld as well. And then the ancient Mesopotamian goddess of Eris, this from ancient Sumer and Babylon and Acadia. Feminine Scorpio, this is about us connecting to our passions and being strong and sovereign, and knowing what is juicy, knowing what turns us on, and really able to engage in a more ready to take action, ready to take ownership of our passions and take ownership of our I say master and control of our emotional physical domains, and taking things to the edge a bit, and being able to feel the life force of Earth, the life force of each other, in relationship with each other, and in community, and the strength of being able to follow the passion into, hey, the feminine the feminine principle, not just specifically women, but our connection to the feminine as an archetype. This is entering into Scorpio territory. So it is that about the strength of that and what was hidden. You know, Scorpio was a sign that was strongly violated and feared, you know, throughout history, especially the last 2,000 to 3,000 years, especially since the monotheistic religions took over and the patriarchy really asserted itself. This is a chance to connect with that and not be afraid to face our fears around this and not be afraid to show who we are, but to throw it in other people's faces either, but just to own that passion, own that truth within ourselves that we might be passionate about. And this Venus and Scorpio transit, it's going to last about a month's time. And again, in a future slide, I'll take a look at like when that is when it moves into the sign of Sagittarius later on in December. So just to connect, this is a slide I'm going to put some additional attention on in the next video, but not to forget Eris here. She's been highly valuable this year in our connection, especially in its relationship with Pluto, Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, and her configuration, her alignment into that space. And so she was looked at as discordia, as chaos. But that was a label that was given to her by the patriarchal gods. She isn't necessarily that. She has her own sovereignty and her own way, and she was clever and intelligent and strong in herself and willful. She's got a kind of a combination of archetypes: Gemini, Scorpio, Aries, and maybe even a little bit of Virgo thrown in there, depending on one's perspective about her own qualities that come out. So we get a chance to, you know, experience this in more so in these coming weeks, and really connect with it more solidly. So, you know, Eris is going to have you know, more relationship with Pluto, and Pluto's going to start to peel, you know, get a little bit farther away from its square with Eris in the coming years, but there's still going to be some strong influence. And I think we need Eris. I think we can welcome Eris into the field and listen to what she, as an archetype, as a goddess, has to say here in this space. All right. Well, I just want to, you know, thank you all. Of course, I do readings and classes, and I'm going to be doing. I've set myself up with a particular online school called the International Academy of Self-Mastery, and I'm going to have some courses on there. I've already got a free course that's there, but I'm planning on having some, you know, low-cost, full-on astrology courses. So that's something to look forward into the future, and there'll be notices that'll be sent out around that. So I just want to thank you all for being a part of this, and you know, if you connect and like this video or subscribe to it, you'll definitely get future notices of videos that I do. If this is something that you're into and want to check out more in the future, or even go to inspiralnexus.com, my website, to check more things out, and, you know, experience more about what I share through the language of shamanic astrology and beyond. So there's so much more to share and to experience here, and I encourage all of you to you know, to also do your own exploration and research and meditation around all of this. So just love and peace to you all, and I wish you a beautiful day ahead, and in the coming weeks, and also have an amazing eclipse if you get to experience that where you are. Take care, everyone.